Hello and welcome back to Tutoring with Gavin. In this series of video tutorials, I'll be teaching you how to write a grade 9 essay for each of the GCSE literature exam questions. In this video tutorial, I'll be taking you through the process of writing an essay for the following question, which is on the AQA literature past papers from 2018 for Romeo and Juliet. Read the following extract. The first thing I would do if faced with this question is highlight the key words so that I'm absolutely sure I understand what I'm being asked to do. In this case, it's clear that the focus is on the relationship between young and adults and how Shakespeare presents them. To show how he does this, I need quotations from the play, and I'll examine the imagery, literary devices and dramatic techniques used by Shakespeare. I would start by jotting down some prompts that I need to cover in this essay, which is purely guided by the mark scheme. This is the best way to understand what the exam board are looking for. In each paragraph, I'll check this list because this is how I'm rewarded with marks. The prompts would include form and structure, genre, themes, setting, context, literary dramatic devices, effect on the audience, quotations and evidence, terminology, writer's ideas or purpose, personal response, and then proofread for spelling, punctuation and grammar. Next, I will plot out the key moments in the play that answer the questions, and I'd synthesize these ideas into a sequence plan. So initially I'll start off with writing about the prince and the young, and then Romeo and his parents, then Juliet and her parents, then Friar and Romeo, and finishing on the nurse and Juliet, and the conclusion and personal response. Okay, here's the essay. The first relationship we are presented with by Shakespeare is one between the adult authority of Prince Aeschylus and the youth of Verona. The young men have been behaving immaturely and violently, so he takes on the role of father figure when he says in his monologue, "Rebellious subjects, enemies to peace." Many teenagers over time have seen themselves as rebellious, but in this context, it suggests that they are challenging civilized Verona with their petty squabbles of an ancient grudge. The word ancient is also used by Prince Aeschylus when he talks about the effect of their pernicious rage on the ancient citizens of Verona. The adjective pernicious is one of many used to describe the young, including bloody, mistempered, and cankered. This powerful imagery would have had an emotive effect on the older audience of Shakespeare's time, which would have felt the tensions that their strict patriarchal society created for the young. The prince seems to be suggesting that life in Verona is made worse by these young men, a view echoed in older people throughout history. This tension between old and young, a key theme in the play, is presented by Shakespeare early on and developed later with other relationships as part of the cause of the tragedy, demonstrated by Romeo and Juliet's inability to act in a more measured and sensible way. Shakespeare himself married very young and knew the pitfalls of a forceful love that might not end well. So in this paragraph, I've mentioned elements of the form, structure, genre, and also context, as well as touching on some key themes. I've also zoomed in on some of the language and its effect on the audience. In Act 1, Scene 1, Benvolio is very respectful towards Lord and Lady Montague, and they seem genuinely concerned for Romeo's black and portentous mood. Shakespeare captures the confusion they feel about their son's behaviour when they tell Benvolio in a rhyming couplet, "Could we but learn from whence his sorrows grow, we would as willingly give cure as know." The word cure suggests that teenagers have a medical condition that makes them behave differently from adults. Most parents in the audience would recognise this from their own teenage children, who seem both frustrating and mysterious in their behaviour. Shakespeare is showing here that this is another cause of the later problems, with Romeo unable to talk to his parents about his feelings, and therefore takes the wrong advice from Friar Lawrence. The rhyming couplets help Shakespeare present Romeo's parents as calm and loving, but they also make the mistake of not talking to their son when they have the chance, instead leaving it to Benvolio. This suggests that the relationship is not strong enough to allow such communication, which is common in many parent-child relationships. It is also significant that Lord and Lady Montague are absent for the rest of the play, until the discovery of the dead lovers at the end, when we hear from Lord Montague that his wife has died of grief. Shakespeare makes them absent and therefore neglectful parents. Shakespeare has created the Capulets and Montagues as typical of the upper classes, who often leave it to others to raise their children. So this paragraph explores the theme of relationships more deeply and how different audiences over time might be affected. It also touches on the structure of the play. The relationship between Juliet and her parents is very different to Romeo. In Shakespeare's time, daughters were seen as property of the father, to use in whatever way benefited him politically, financially or socially. This lies at the heart of the problem for Juliet, who, just like Desdemona in Othello, wants to choose her own husband. In the extract, the language of Lord Capulet is a clue to their relationship when he asks whether his wife has delivered to her our decree. A decree is an official order or decision, especially one made by the ruler of a country. If someone in authority decrees that something must happen, they decide or state this officially. This suggests a very formal relationship between parents and daughter. By disobeying them, she is effectively committing a social crime. Shakespeare here is exploring another theme of the individual versus society. His audience would have been sympathetic to Juliet, but ultimately seen her behaviour as reckless. Her mother jokes that the fool were married to her grave, suggesting that her daughter will die without marrying. But Shakespeare's death imagery, using the word grave, could be taken as meaning serious, but also tragic. The lack of respect from Lord Capulet is evident in his statement, unworthy as she is, and thinks she is lucky to be marrying the worthy Paris. Juliet's response is to use the contrasting imagery of love and hate. Shakespeare is introducing this idea that these strong emotions are often apparent in parent-child relationships and can lead to violent outcomes, shown here in her father's response. Out you green sickness carrion, out you baggage. Carrion refers to dead and decaying flesh of animals, while green sickness denotes a form of anemia, thought to affect girls in puberty, making them pale. This diseased and decaying imagery symbolises their relationship. I've covered some context and another theme through the close analysis of the imagery. I've also mentioned a link with another of Shakespeare's plays. Friar Lawrence, although well-intentioned, contributes to the tragic ending for the young Romeo and Juliet. As a man of the church, he would have been respected and trusted in 1595 when the play was probably written. As with many troubled young people, they often turn to neutral adults for advice when their parents seem like the enemy. Friar Lawrence has a keen interest in poisons and plants, talking in rhyming couplets that give him a light-hearted tone. When Romeo asks him, "I pray that thou consent to marry us today," he could have refused his pupil on the grounds that it goes against the wishes of the parents who have the legal and moral hold over their children. He could have given sound advice, especially as he knows that Romeo very recently had sallow cheeks for Rosalind. Romeo is clearly on the rebound and needs good counsel. However, despite understanding that Romeo's love did read by rote that could not spell, which suggests he knows that Romeo is too immature to be truly in love, he still goes ahead with this alliance because it could turn your household's rancour to pure love. Friar Lawrence then is exploiting Romeo's impetuous behaviour for his own agenda, which is both reckless and manipulative. When he concocts the idea of faking Juliet's death, it feels as though he just wants to try out one of his potions, rather than solve the problem. He could have arranged for her to join Romeo in Mantua, but instead indirectly causes them to both take their lives with this complicated scheme. Of course, this would not have been as emotional or dramatic for the audience, and so Shakespeare instead takes us on a tense and dramatic sequence of miscommunication and ill-timed actions to take the audience on an emotional rollercoaster ride. So in this paragraph I've written about the structure and the effect of the writer's choices on the audience. I've also tried to give a new perspective on the role of the friar and tried to see him not just as a confidant, but someone who actually contributes to the tragedy. The relationship between the nurse and Juliet changes over the course of the play. In the first half, the nurse is loyal and acts as a confidant, replacing Juliet's mother as a constant presence and accomplice. She teases Juliet with repeated sexual innuendo. "Thou wilt fall backwards when thou comest to age." But she is also completely devoted to her. Shakespeare uses her relationship with Juliet for comic purposes in the first half of the play, returning repeatedly to the theme of aging and how the young and old interact. Juliet comments on the nurse. "Had she affection and warm youthful blood, she would be as swift in motion as a ball. But old folks many feign as they were dead, unwieldy, slow, heavy and pale as lead." Shakespeare's use of rhyming couplets and contrasting imagery makes this commentary on adults fun and light-hearted. However, in the second half of the play, the nurse betrays Juliet's wishes by giving her very different advice and is no longer Juliet's ally. The nurse encourages Juliet to betray Romeo and deny their marriage. After that moment, all comic scenes are over and the nurse is no longer included in Juliet's clandestine plans. Juliet's funny quips about the old suddenly become bitter. "Ancient damnation, O most wicked fiend, to dispraise my lord with that same tongue which she hath praised him with, above compare, so many thousand times. Shakespeare seems to be showing the nurse in more of a parenting role, saying what is best for Juliet at the expense of their relationship. Depending on age, audiences could see this in two different ways: betrayal by another adult, or sound advice that would have prevented the eventual tragedy. This is what makes Shakespeare's play so engaging and thought-provoking, with audiences being drawn into dramatic situations that are often ambiguous or complex. Shakespeare's own daughter, Susanna, would have been 13 years old when he wrote the play, so he would have understood many of these issues. Everyone can relate to Romeo and Juliet, but not all have experienced how difficult it is as adults to maintain a good relationship with the young. So in the last paragraph, I've shown the dramatic arc of the relationship between Juliet and the nurse, trying to link it to the imagery and the theme of youth versus old, and I've also added some personal response and linked it to the contextual information. Now don't forget to proofread. Firstly, read the essay backwards, isolating each word to check for spelling, then read the essay aloud in your head, listening for any grammar mistakes. Here is a grade 9 description in the mark scheme. So to check whether I've achieved this top level, which will give me a grade 9, you should ask these questions. Is this essay critical? It is critical because it closely analyses the text and forms a judgment at the end based on evidence I present. Is it exploratory? It is exploratory because it addresses the task in a focused way and tries to look at the issue from different perspectives that take into account the writer's purpose. Is it a well-structured argument? Yes, because it's properly planned, with each point covered in a seamless sequence. Does it take a conceptualized approach to the full task? Yes, because the conclusions are complex and carefully considered. Is it supported by a range of judicious references? Yes, as I've used quotes from the play as a whole that help explore the question effectively. Is there a fine-grained and insightful analysis of language and form and structure? Yes, because by zooming in on the imagery and the literary devices, it enables analysis on how Shakespeare affects the audience, and by considering the key structural moment. Is there a judicious use of subject terminology? Yes, I've used terms like monologue, tragedy, context, rhyming couplets, imagery, symbolizes, theme, and ambiguous. Is there a convincing exploration of one or more ideas or perspectives or contextual factors or interpretations? Yes, by exploring the theme of youth versus age and the context of the period in history in which the story is set. As with any essay, there are many choices you have to make, but ultimately you must answer the question in an imaginative way, showing that you understand that the text is a creation by a dramatist or writer who had to make creative choices for audiences. If you show that understanding, then you will always be rewarded by the examiner. Well, I hope this has helped you in your preparation for the exam. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to the channel. Until next time.